Friday, September 8th. In the early hours of the afternoon, the German armies and their panzer divisions approached the outskirts of Warsaw, flattening everything in their path. Von Reichenau and his 10th Army enter the suburbs of the Polish capital. Von List and his 14th Army reach the River San and the divisions of Heinz Guderian, the River Bug. Edward Ritz, commander-in-chief of the Polish forces, is aware that disaster is looming, as France and Britain are not fulfilling their promises to help, and accepts the proposal of General Tadeusz Korycba for the army of Poznan to carry out a counter-offensive. The French government, worried by the bad news from Poland, is not conscious of the historic error it is committing. In a gesture of help towards the Poles, General Pretilat continues the timid offensive in the Saar, convinced that Hitler will transfer troops from the east to meet the threat. But the Nazi leader does not oblige. In response to events in Europe, U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt orders a general mobilization to increase the number of effectives in the different branches of the armed forces. From Holland, the exiled last German Kaiser, Wilhelm II, sends a message to Hitler, warning him that Germany is facing a disaster greater than that of the First World War. Saturday, September 9th. 3 infantry divisions, flanked by 2 cavalry brigades of the Polish Poznan army, under the orders of Tadeusz Kostreba, launch a surprise counterattack in the early hours of the morning against the German 8th Army near the river Bzura. The intention is to halt their advance and open a breach in their lines, which allow Polish troops to conduct an orderly withdrawal to Warsaw and the river Vistula. In the south, the city of Lodz falls into the hands of German and Slovak troops, who thus recover land occupied by Poland some years before. Marshal Edward Śmigły-Ritz, commander-in-chief of the Polish army, sees disaster approaching and makes a desperate plea for the Western powers to intervene. But the British cannot see any possibility of undertaking military action against Germany, and General Maurice Gamelin, chief of the French General Staff, failing to fulfill the promise made to the Poles before the war, continues with his timid action against the German defensive line of the Westfall, arguing that in this way his armies are occupying a good part of the Luftwaffe. In Berlin, Göring makes a speech, declaring that the Nazis are men of peace and will never go to war with Russia. Meanwhile, all over Germany, the Gestapo continues arresting and sending prisoners to the camp at Dachau, near Munich. For those who do not accept the excesses of the Third Reich, it has become almost impossible to leave the country, as the frontiers have been closed and movement restricted. Sunday, September 10th. The Polish counterattack on the Bzura River begins to grind to a halt, and the Germans carry out an enveloping operation. The Wehrmacht 4th Army fights to the west of the River Bug. The panzers of the 10th Army penetrate from the south and put pressure on the Polish divisions in the area of Radom, while Hitler, who has traveled to Poland aboard his train America, watches as the enormous military might of the Third Reich closes in on Warsaw, and the filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl captures events on camera for future generations. In the Polish capital, under the bombs of the Luftwaffe, the Polish General Staff decides to regroup the troops situated in the Modlin Fortress, with the remainder of the regiments fighting around the capital, creating the Army of Warsaw under the orders of Colonel Walerian Kazuma. General Frank Halder of the Army General Staff and Admiral Canaris, head of the German Military Intelligence Service, witness with horror the actions of the SS against the civilian population. In Great Britain, the press criticizes the government for carrying on what one member of parliament calls a confetti war, dropping leaflets on German cities, while the Nazis are destroying Poland. In the United States, the New York Times, for the first time, calls the conflict the Second World War. Monday, September 11th. The first troops of the British Expeditionary Force disembark in France under the orders of John Vereker, Lord Gort. Meanwhile, Polish resistance begins to crack, and in Radom, to the south of Warsaw, part of the army surrenders to the Germans. 68,000 men and hundreds of artillery pieces fall into the hands of the Nazis. The remainder of the Polish troops dig in at the Modlin fortress and in the area around Warsaw. Although the army leaders have moved to Brzeź, General Walerian Suma decides to convert the city into a giant bunker with a number of defensive circles. Hitler, knowing that victory is within his grasp, seeks peace with Britain. But the British are not prepared to negotiate, while Hitler and his criminal group are in charge of Germany. For his part, Stalin orders the withdrawal of the Soviet ambassador in Warsaw in preparation for the invasion of his troops from the east. In the Sea War, U-48, commanded by Herbert Schulze, sinks the merchant ship Furby. Schulze, as was his custom, sends an uncoded message, on this occasion addressed to the First Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, indicating the position of the ship and requesting the Royal Navy pick up survivors. His conduct makes him something of a celebrity both in Germany and Britain. Tuesday, September 12th. To the west of Warsaw, the panzer divisions corner the Polish army in Kutno, between the rivers Vistula and Bezura. To the east of the capital, in Kaluzyn, Polish forces defeat the German 44th Infantry Regiment. In the recently occupied Polish region of Silesia, the SS continue the deportation of the Jewish population. Wilhelm Canaris tries to speak with the Nazi leader about the mass assassinations taking place in the occupied territories. But Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the High Command, dissuades him, as the orders have come from Hitler himself. Canaris returns to the front demoralized by the brutality he has witnessed. Hitler meets with Göring and Generals Braustich and Keitel and tells them that the French incursion into German territory in the west will not receive a definitive response until the invasion of Poland is completed. However, in private, he informs his adjutant Rudolf Schmundt that France will be smashed when the Polish campaign is over. The Allied Supreme War Council meets for the first time in Abbeville in France, and Marshal Gamelin orders the withdrawal of his troops from German territory. The agreement signed with Poland on May 19, 1939, which, in the event of a German invasion of Poland, envisioned an all-out French offensive in the West, has been forgotten. Wednesday, September 13th. The SS Totenkopf Death's Head divisions continue to leave a trail of death and destruction and utter desolation among the Polish population. The Wehrmacht uses all its forces to fight the Polish army, militia, and resistance groups, devastating towns and cities. The Bzura counteroffensive has failed, following the incorporation into the battle of the German 4th and the 1st Panzer divisions, which cut off the retreat of the Army of Poznan to Warsaw. Thousands of Polish troops are trapped inside a pocket, suffering non-stop shelling and the constant bombing of enemy planes. In France, the Prime Minister Edward Daladier forms a war cabinet and personally takes charge of foreign affairs following the dismissal of Georges Bonnet, who intended to negotiate with Germany behind Britain's back. Following the meeting of the Allied Supreme War Council, the President of the Republic, Albert Lebrun, ratifies the order for the withdrawal of the French troops that have occupied the Saar in order not to provoke Germany. Hitler's gamble has paid off. Poland has been abandoned. In the Battle of the Atlantic, there is no let-up in the sinking of merchant ships sailing to Britain by German U-boats. The war has anticipated the Hitler-approved Plan Z by some years, and Donitz's Grey Wolves use all the methods at their disposal to destroy the British fleet. The areas around British ports are mined, and some Kriegsmarine battleships are used as pirate ships. Thursday, September 14th. German troops complete the encirclement of Warsaw. The bulk of the Polish army has been smashed. The Wehrmacht General Staff proposes to Hitler that they lay siege to the city until starvation forces its inhabitants to capitulate, but the Nazi leader opts for intensive bombing by the Luftwaffe. The port garrison at Chydniai surrenders, and 17,000 Polish soldiers are taken prisoner. German planes have destroyed the enemy air force, while General Guderian's panzers confront the Polish infantry divisions in the area of Kobrin, where the Poles are unable to coordinate their operations due to antiquated communication systems. At sea, there is no let-up in the German submarine offensive, and U-39, under the command of Gerhard Glattes, sights the aircraft carrier Ark Royal to the northwest of Ireland in the area of Royal Bank. Glattes orders 3 torpedoes to be fired, but these explode before reaching the enemy ship. The escort destroyers, following the trail of the torpedoes, sink U-39, the first submarine lost by the Third Reich. It is the start of what will be called the torpedo crisis. In the Soviet Union, Stalin orders the recruitment of 1 million new soldiers in preparation for the imminent invasion of Polish territory in the east. From the Vatican, Pope Pius XII makes a call for peace that protects the basic rights of men and women and preserves the integrity of nations.